And welcome to this week's episode of the Still Loading podcast. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined here today by Pradeep Sacitharan. I'm sorry if I didn't do that perfectly, but I tried my best. It's a brilliant surname, so I will keep practicing that. But no, it's an absolute delight to have Pradeep with us today. He has an amazing story that I am really delighted and overjoyed to be sharing with you on this podcast today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Pradeep, so we can get to know you a bit better?
Sure. Hey guys, Pradeep, Sacitharan. No amazing surname.
It is an amazing surname.
I quit my traditional career as a scientist and medic 3 years ago. I formed my own company. So what we essentially do is we buy online brands, we launch our own brands, and we consult as well. And we're trying to build a bigger business. I like to say empire with different verticals, and then at the same time, I also kind of help and serve, try to tell my story, a unique story, and try to help and serve others as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And when we actually met, because normally I meet people just before the podcast and we have a chat, I was really blown away by Pradeep's journey. So I'd like to go back a bit in time, because I think it's really important to share kind of where your origin story, if you like, where it all came from. And yeah, share with us kind of the potted journey along to this point.
Sure. How long do you have?
Yeah.
Essentially, my parents are from Sri Lanka. For many that don't know, there was a war in the 80s and 90s. Even before that, my family got affected very much. So my mom, a very brave, strong woman, decided to smuggle me for a better life into the UK. We were war refugees, came in. We settled in a very rough council estate. Those Americans listening to us, it's called social housing in the US, right? But we didn't know at the time, we had no choice, but it was one of the best drug manufacturing areas in London. So I grew up with very rough people, some hardcore gangsters. Luckily, I didn't get into any serious legal troubles, but I got into a lot of fights. I didn't back down and so forth. So, it was the bad people who surrounded me. No one had careers, no one had jobs, no one had a degree. So I dropped out of school. I worked in Tesco's and shops and so forth. And then eventually at 21, I got into a serious fight that led me into a coma for 4 hours. Woke up, I didn't see anyone, didn't see God, didn't see anything spectacular. And I said, what am I doing with my life? Luckily, I picked up some discipline from weightlifting from 15. So I kind of had that focus and discipline. And I made some phone calls. I got into a foundation access course here in the UK that covered kind of your fundamental sciences. Done very well in my first degree. All of a sudden, I had a scholarship at Imperial College. Then I got a scholarship to do a PhD in molecular medicine at Oxford. Then I was a Fulbright scholar at Harvard. So I went from dropout to Harvard in 7 to 8 years, which the journey. Look, I tell people the certificates don't mean much because I was doing drug discovery, I loved it, but the journey changed the whole thinking and the mindset, and it's all about mindset. Then I beat the system because I always question the system, and I said, hey, why should I wait 20 years to discover drugs which I know can help mankind now, right? So I went around knocking on doors. Everyone said this guy's crazy in the West. So I went to France, I went to Israel, learned some techniques, lived there, understood it for probably a year, came back. Still, the Western system didn't help me out. So I made 272 phone calls. One guy picked up in China, went to China, packed my bags again, questioned the system in a different country. And those drugs we discovered in 18 months, made a name for myself in academia. Then biotech came knocking saying, hey, you're going to do some business development. Again, I had no clue what I was doing. I said, okay, let me try it. So dropped out of academia, went to business development, biotech, grew the company by 80%, done a lot of mergers. Then I found myself stuck in China during the pandemic. And then luck kind of evolved again. I was in this hotel. I met all these factory owners. I'm very social. Started talking to them. What do you do? What do you do? What do you do? We sell online. I'm like, let me see your margins now. Blown away. I said, I need to question the system again. Started hustling, started selling toys on the side. A side hustle is always good if anyone's listening. And then I was very successful on this online business, but kept the vice president of the science and academia going. Then I came back to UK. They said, hey, there's no chance we can give you a position at this level, at this age. So I tried for 8 months and I said, to the hell with it. And then I just went full-time online business and my own business. So it's been a very interesting journey until my mid-30s now. Dropped out a lot of things, kind of scaled other things and kept moving on and seized the opportunity. So it's been fascinating. I try to tell this story to a lot of people saying, you can do a lot of impossible things very quickly if you have the right mindset and you kind of have the right attitude to life.
No, I really resonate with that in the sense that often we're told that there is a certain amount of time that you need to take or invest in or prove that you've got the expertise or qualifications. And I think with the new digital economy, what we're actually finding is how quickly can you grasp something and see its applicability rather than necessarily having 20 years of AI experience. There isn't 20 years of AI experience. So in certain ways in the digital economy that doesn't work. So how have you sort of challenged the perceptions of time? Because you mentioned before, people were saying to you, oh, it takes 20 years to develop drugs. And you were like, no, it can't, we can do this now. And it sounds like that's always a challenge for you, this kind of almost pushing against the expectations of time.
Yeah. So there's a slide I show to people when I do on a kind of a physical presentation, and it's got the classic saying, Rome was not built in a day. And I have a massive X on it, right? And I said, actually, if you look at the data, and someone's probably going to correct me, it's 1,223 something years with a lot of Caesars and a lot of emperors and so forth. So so it's actually wrong. You and I do not have 1,223 years. No. But historically, what I look at is Cleopatra kind of conquered her known world by 36. Alexander the Great conquered his known world by 32. These guys had massive risks in front of them, life or death, and also betrayal, and they just went at it. So it's a kind of psyche we've been set that, take your time, do your qualification, and so forth. But if you really look at the bigger philosophical picture and the smaller one, you just don't have much time. And why wait? When you want to do something like discover drugs or actually, provide for a family through a steady career, why wait? Why not accelerate the learning curve? And I've done that practically by actually learning key skills without doing all the massive kind of, hey, 1 year, 2 year here and there. Learn the key skills that will execute the bigger goal and execute the bigger goal with unknowns. And on the way, you'll learn new things to execute the bigger goal. So that's kind of a big philosophical picture with kind of practical kind of tools I used as well.
Yeah, it'd be great to share some of your tips in a sense of how did you accelerate your learning curve? Because that is a real turning point to actually get to your outcomes quicker and your goals quicker. So what do you do to help you accelerate?
Yes, very good question, actually. I call it I'm lazily intelligent. I'm lazily intelligent. If I had to think about it. I sat down and think about it. Evolutionally, there's a reason for us to be lazy. If it's not evolutionally needed, it won't be in the system, right? Or design, whatever you believe in. So I think being lazy means conserving energy for other purposes. So you conserve energy, conserve some fat. So when winter comes, you burn that fat, right? So if you look at that in a mindset, if you're procrastinating, you don't want to hit something or you want to learn something. So what I say is I'm lazily intelligent because I cut the crap out. I define the bigger goal loosely sometimes, and I know how to get there, and I learn what's necessary to get there. So I'm lazily intelligent, and I prioritize very well to get to that bigger goal, and I kind of delegate other stuff. And that's all from a simple business model to, at one point I had 600 people under me. So if you have that kind of lazily intelligent attitude, it helps a lot because it kind of allows your mind to focus on the necessary. And that's very important because sometimes we have a lot of things telling us that we need all these things here to learn to this outcome. It's not necessary. You actually need the experience and one or two things to hit the outcome.
Yeah, no, I can see that. It's interesting you say that, because when I'm working with my clients, so I work with scale up and startup founders and C-suite or people I coach, I often get them to visualize, right? So I get them to kind of think about what their goal is, and actually really sit down and almost close their eyes and imagine, what does it look like at the end state? Like, what can you think, feel, taste, touch, almost put yourself in that boardroom or in that presentation, and what is it that you're doing, because then you can almost imagine yourself from that state. So I would love to know about you. We spoke about this when we caught up, but you talked about visualization being really powerful for you and something you teach young people and people you work with. So I'd love for you to share kind of your perspective on that.
Yeah, I don't have your luxury or your ability to coach CEOs or something, but I do have these talks and even one-on-one with coffee with friends and family. Then how do you do this? I'm like, so yesterday I went to meet someone and they said, "What are your hobbies?" And I said, "I go to the gym, I run, I think, and I dream." They're like, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "Well, it's not my quote. I wish it was my quote, but there's a beautiful quote. They say the most dangerous men and women on this earth are the ones who dream with their eyes open." I love that quote. So essentially, I have affirmations. I have things I write on my laptop or on my book. I read them out, and every morning for 20 minutes. I've been doing this ever since 15 or 14, or even maybe younger when I was weightlifting. But it's helped me a lot. I listen to some kind of music or whatever music I feel like, and I'm just in the mood with my coffee, walking around, and I'm visualizing the daily goals and the bigger goals. It's not something I forced, but something I really enjoy doing. I think we all enjoy dreaming, but what I actually do is I'm acting them out physically, and it sounds bonkers and cuckoo. It really does to all my highly educated friends, right? But I actually do that, and I pretend I'm making deals. I'm pretend I'm meetings. I'm pretend I'm speaking. I'm pretend I'm receiving bigger goals and awards and so forth. I pretend I've got that new car. I pretend I got that new house. Some at times, and it helps because I feel the mind reads something, the aim, and then it's already lived it. And once you lived it, it's more also rehearsal. So even if you do it's good, it's like an actor. I mean, they're rehearsing, right? So they're kind of rehearsing the mind for that goal. So it's always helped me, and it helps me also, I think, in different scenarios. If it's rehearsed, you can deviate the plan because there's something set. If there's nothing set in the mind, you can't deviate or be flexible. So that kind of scenario play out also helps as well for me.
Yeah, the way I think about it, because I obviously research a lot to do with the mind. And when you're rehearsing, what I think it is you are then saying, these are the behaviors, these are the thoughts, these are the actions that person who I've rehearsed to be would do. Whereas if you don't have that anchor to say, this is the person who does these things. So say, for example, you are someone who goes to the gym and you have a goal of like running a 5K with no problems. That person's a lot different to the person who doesn't go to the gym, who doesn't have a 5K goal. You would be more likely to stay sitting on the sofa watching Netflix or just not investing your time into it. So that's how I kind of perceive it. It is the way to help yourself, motivate yourself, and change the behaviors within you to get to be to that future person.
Absolutely, I agree. If your mind can't see it, you won't do it.
Yeah.
And also, it's about setting bigger goals. I always talk about bold, historic goals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I believe you cannot ever surpass your wildest dream or goal, and that is directly proportionate. Your dreaming and goal setting is directly proportionate to your self confidence and self esteem. So I agree with you 100%.
I'd love to talk a little bit around this self-confidence and self-esteem, and we're going to touch a little bit upon imposter syndrome, because I know I work with a lot of women as well, and often I feel that women cap themselves at a certain level because, and this is just anecdotal evidence, right? I mean, there is also some evidence to show that women, for example, don't necessarily negotiate as hard as men for salary. It's not conclusive across the board, but it's just that can be one of the reasons why they don't get paid so much. There's also unconscious bias and huge massive things with that. But with this imposter syndrome, you can almost see how it's directly linked. If you don't think, oh, you're like, I'm faking this, oh, I shouldn't be here, how could your dream get bigger? You know what I mean? It'd be great to understand your perspective from that.
Yeah, so 2 points on that, and we'll touch on the women's angle as well, right? So I don't believe in imposter syndrome. Everyone, probably scientists, are going to go crazy at the moment, but I call it adventurous syndrome because you can never be an imposter if you have never done it ever before. If there's no data from your family or friends or your surrounding coming in, you never kind of went to this field or started a business, you're not imposter, you're adventurer. It's like a new syndrome, right? So you can't fake something that you don't know, right? You only are actually in going into the darkness. Brilliant. And I love that. And it motivates me, and it motivates me seeing other people doing it as well. So it can never be an imposter syndrome. It's only an imposter syndrome because you're comparing yourself to someone else or something else, or set of goals that society has said, right? If you take away that and say, hey, I'm actually doing something brand new. It doesn't make sense to me, but it's actually, I'm an adventurer, right? I'm Columbus, right? I'm going to new territory. So it's not imposter syndrome, you're adventure syndrome. And I love it. And, that's the mindset I have when I do stuff. And if you want to do something big or bold, you have to, be in the ambiguity all the time. Second point, I totally understand about women and young girls and so forth, because I say this a lot, and I'm being very open and honest. Most of my best mentors were women. Most of my best students as PhD students and also employees were women. Sorry, guys, right? They're brilliant with the sciences, organized and so forth. And what I had when I was a top tier manager was open doors. I guess I made managerial decision, but most of it was marriage counseling, career counseling, pregnancy counseling, making sure all my people had the best career opportunities, right? And that was big for me, and I loved doing that. And we had a situation where a student, which was one of my best students actually, just couldn't nail the interviews for a postdoc at prestigious universities. So I went back and told her, hey, let's actually, you're actually nailing the answers. It's the way you come across, right? Perception is everything. So I said, every time a question is answered, you say to yourself, how ruthless or how confident can this answer be, right? Because fire back at them. So that's the mantra she said, right? And the first interview afterwards at Cambridge, she got the job. After we had that switch into it. So I don't know the science behind the female mind. I think many people don't, right? All the men will probably agree, but I do understand that the imposter syndrome will be more instilled in women from my past experience. But guys, girls, break it down. You're an adventurer. If there's a guy there, sod him, go out, go hard, have a little mantra in your head saying, how hard can my answer be? How best is the answer for me and my career? And if you want to relate this, if you want to relate and motivate yourself, what's the best answer I can do to get the job or get this goal to help my family? And that's a mantra in my head, or in someone's head, I actually said, and it worked for her.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good piece of advice. And I think as well, from my side of the fence, to add on to that, is I often think when you're, first of all, I think be careful about labeling yourself as anything where you're saying I am an identity. It can change. Neuroplasticity is real. The personality is not permanent. Two, you're absolutely right. If you're doing something new, it's absolutely normal to feel a bit nervous because it's new, and that might generate some thoughts that are like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. And that's just you being a bit more like, oh, it's new. So instead of thinking, oh, I can't do this, it could just be it's new and unfamiliar. And so I love that concept that you're putting forward about it being an adventurer mindset, because then you're like, I can't do this, but I know I can work it out, and I know I will work it out in the end. Yeah, exactly. I'd love to now talk about a leader that influenced you on your journey. You've had a great, varied sort of like pathway to this point in your career. And it'd be great to know a leader that inspired you on your journey.
Yeah, I won't define as a career because I've been all over the place.
Yeah, well, the etymology of career actually is to move forward. So it's like from carrière, like the French, which is like a road. So I like career because it's more a case of how you progress through life, through the work that you do, rather than jobs. That's my thinking.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I learned something new.
You're welcome.
So the way I approach this question is that I never had one influential leader. the way I looked at it, I looked at history, I looked at people physically in me or in my field, and I picked the best qualities from all of them. Um, and I'm trying my best to actually if I meet someone, I said, hey, I want to be like this guy in 5 years or 3 years. I go to this person and goes, let me buy you lunch. Let me buy you dinner. Most of the time, I go away, but go again, you win them over. Young kids, I tell them, win people over, try to get close to them, learn from them, sit from them. But the mind is always, hey, I've learned this the hard way. Hey, this is just a human being, right? They have amazing qualities and they're not so amazing qualities. So I can't say a specific leader, I can't name them, but what I do is I look at historical leaders and people physically in my kind of area and field over time, and I take the best out of them. And I take the best qualities and I take the best learnings and mindsets from them and I put them together, because I don't want to be one representative. It's like the Hindu gods, right? That you want to have many facets and faces to you and many powers to you, right? So that's, I think, it's important. So I'll tell people not to pick one leader or style, just to get many styles as possible. And as you said, neuroplasticity changes. So you can actually also then, there's points where I can say, I need to switch to this mode. I need to switch to this mode. I need to be this person. And you're always having different faces. And it's very important, different leadership kind of opportunities and scenarios as well. So I think that's one thing. I don't know if it really answered your question, but that's how I approach kind of a mentor, role model, or influential leader.
Yeah, well, I mean, my particular research into leadership for the digital age is kind of lending itself to this idea of it being multifaceted. I don't think one particular method or approach is the way forward, because you're dealing with people remotely, you're dealing with people asynchronously, you're dealing with people, if you're in certain companies, that are in different cultures, different time zones, they have different needs, different perspectives. And I think, yeah, it's that ability to be flexible and agile. I know that word gets used a lot, but it's kind of that flexibility, I think, is really huge to be a great leader in the digital age. I'd love for you to take us through something that you went through on your own journey that really helped you to become a better leader.
Oh, that's a great question. It probably leadership. Yeah, I've had places and opportunities throughout universities, presidents of social clubs and so forth. The real leadership was probably in biotech when I stepped up, became vice president of business development, and the company grew by 80% rapidly. I found myself with 600 people across the world. Like, what is going on here, right? I was young as well. I had managers of managers of managers, right? So the step up was hard. That time I had to reflect on my kind of poise. My communication was good, but I had to represent on my kind of ambience and the way I kind of come across, and how I can change that, because different cultures and different places, I had to operate in Europe compared to China, and the way I was brought up was totally different to the way I had to function, right? So that was a big kind of learning curve and a big hurdle where I had to look inward. And I thought I was very culturally aware and EQ was high, but I had a bit more work to do. I kind of quickly caught up, but that was very important. That was challenging as well, because it's easy to be a leader in a known surrounding. It's harder to be a leader on unknown surroundings, particularly when you're dealing with unknowns, right? So and then you have to actually culturally shift that and see who's in front of you to attack a problem, right? But use cultural aspects to attack the problem, instead of like your mindset or the way you've been brought up. So that was very hard in China, but I kind of got over it, and I believe I done very well.
What did you do specifically to help you kind of develop that EQ in that cultural context?
Oh, that's a very good point. So I'm a big believer in getting out there and talking and understanding. I was already in China, but there were 2 or 3 scenarios I reflected on. I'm a big believer, if you can't, again, it's a dream state affirmation in the morning. If you can't get somewhere or learn something, the human mind is beautiful. If you just sit and think and imagine and be self-critical and take away your ego and your identity. Those two things are very dangerous, powerful but dangerous. If you take away and just look at the truth, I think you can actually come to good points. So a lot of self-reflection on 2 or 3 key scenarios that went wrong in my mind, how I can fix that, right? Because I always say failure is a misconceived perception. Fix it and go again, right? Something's gone. So there's a perception or something that's went wrong. So self-reflection on that scenario and go and improve. So that's what's helped me in those scenarios.
Yeah, no, I love that idea. Sorry,
Yeah.
carry on.
Yeah, and there are elements where I read from books. Of course, I'm an academic. I used to be academic. I read a lot, but it is at this point I'm not reading a lot as many think. But practical execution, self-reflection is very important.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, self-reflection, that I think more people do, then they'll be able to kind of make better informed decisions. But often we don't want to self-reflect. And I was chatting to a friend of mine who's also a coach, and she said it's because it's a lot of energy to reflect. It's a lot of energy to actually evaluate yourself and to just be like, well, what can I do to improve? And as you mentioned, you've got the ego and your identity, which don't like being challenged internally. So it's like learning, I think, redefining failure, as you say, into more like, what's the learning from this? What can we do better? And I think what I enjoy working with scale-ups and startups with is generally those companies have that mindset. It's not about perfection. It's about what can we do better, because we don't always have it right, because they're starting from a place of ambiguity and then they're drilling into what's their go-to-market proposition.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree with that point. And also to build upon that point on the ego identity, they don't like being challenged, but they'll love to get challenged and self-reflect and be molded if you present the reward to them as well. So when you self-reflect, sometimes I talk about dark desires are good, right? You look at the desires and the reward and you tell the ego or identity, hey, if we don't self-reflect and change, you won't get your reward. It's almost like you're a kid among your kid and a parent in your head as well. And you're coaching your kid in your head, which is the ego and identity, and say, hey, if you don't get this self-reflect and change, that reward is not there. Obviously, being good and perfection is so forth, but I do believe individuals, particularly leaders with big egos, I think if you can tame it and say, hey, you won't get that reward, that's when you actually try to really have a change and go towards it. Because everyone, I think, desires something and wants a certain reward at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think so. I think most people want to improve themselves in some way, shape, or form. I'd love to talk now a little bit about when you were in China and actually scaling your company and growing it to 80% more, right, from when you took over. What sort of tips or things did you do to help you scale, especially in another country?
Yeah, so Google and Microsoft Translate helped a lot.
Yeah, I can imagine.
That's digital transformation. No, so I always talk about when you scale hard, even in e-commerce now, I talk about people and systems, right? So I got the best people. By the way, that requires a lot of failure. You might have to go through a lot of turnaround, right? I wasn't afraid of going through a lot of turnaround and got the right systems in terms of operating systems, EPRs, and acquisition system, financial systems in place. But that's because I got the right people, right? Besides that, people and systems, I try to find a weakness. No, I won't say weakness or a gap in the market or a bottleneck that's not being served, right? For example, during COVID, we were trying to do the whole face mask and everything. It didn't work out because we couldn't get government contract. Now we know why. But anyway,
Yeah, separate thing.
We went back, so we sat down. I was like, what's going on? And I identified that through the whole testing system, that vaccines and others, all the sophisticated animal modeling and primate modeling stuff was shut down. Everyone was scared that you might, get COVID or transmit COVID, and everyone's on lockdown. So what I brilliantly done is I actually acquired all those companies, all those outsourcing companies, and took all the contracts back to China. So sometimes scaling is not looking at your own business model. Sometimes scaling is how we can actually acquire and merge other business models or other learnings to a business to scale quicker. The biggest way to revenue or scaling is to actually buy money, acquire money, or acquire others. I don't know if someone said it, but I always said, if you can't beat them, buy them. uh, so yeah, that's what I've done very well. I think also it doesn't matter what size you are, how small you are, how big you are, acquisition and also identifying bottlenecks and actually incorporating them in your company can be done at a small level, even if it's getting a good person from someone else or a small idea or a small system from somewhere else. Very good. Classic example is Bill Gates actually brought MS-DOS for 50,000 US dollars. He didn't go and make it. He had, I think, a contract with someone and he needed the operating system and he went and brought it for 50,000 USD. Brilliant idea. I think Microsoft wasn't that big and he actually got it very cheap there, and that led to Windows and so forth. So I think that's something that's helped me. So people, systems, and acquisitions and smart building. So that helps as well.
Yeah, no, brilliant. I think that's great advice for people who are in the scaling business. I'd love to now think about, with your journey, what would be your sort of takeaway from your journey? Like, as in, we talked a little bit about mindset, especially when we met in the first instance, and I'd love to hear more about that. Like, how did you develop that over time?
Particularly with business.
Yeah, I think it was about the risk. We talked about risk being a really important part of being a great leader.
Yeah, so I tell people I've seen the best drug dealers, street hustlers, the best. I've worked with Nobel Prize winners. It's crazy. I worked with them, and I've worked with billionaire CEOs, right? All of them, the number one thing that separates them from everyone else, the 0.1%, and I'm not saying they're special, is risk appetite. They're willing to take more risk than anyone, and it's almost like a childlike mindset. I have a saying when people ask me, what is this, right? I say, you got to be a yogi in the journey, right? When you think about the journey, you got to be a Navy SEAL soldier when you execute, and everything else in between, you got to be Forrest Gump. You got to be childish, foolish, and just keep running, right? Right. And those three elements I see, particularly the risk taking, it's almost like a childlike mindset. And it's hard to describe, but you see risk and there's so much data coming, and particularly from highly educated people, and there's nothing wrong with education, but there's almost a paralysis by analysis. When you're very educated, you take risk out, and what the leader does at the highest level is understand the risk, understand the ambiguity, and then sees the darkness right in front of him or her and just goes in, and then you work out right where the light is, right? So I've seen that risk appetite was the greatest thing that the top leaders done very well, because they had so much appetite to take the risk because it was closely tied with their ambition. And that was closely tied with the ability for them to take pressure and stress. So those three things were all closely tied: risk, ambition, and stress management, right? So that's very important. And then when you're a mid-career guy going to high career kind of person, you also need to take that risk to say, hey, there's something unknown here. I'm going to go and get it as well. Risk appetite, I think, is huge, and it stops a lot of things happening in this world, and it stops a lot of people as well.
How have you developed your risk appetite then?
Looking back, I always say to people, you lose some, I've lost weight, a lot of weight. I went from dropout to Harvard. I went from scientist to business guy. I don't know what I'll do next, but it's just looking back saying, hey, you took all these risks and you're here, you're surviving, you're healthy, you're almost lucky that you're doing something, enjoying yourself. Look back at all your risks, look back at all your life and say, hey, it's fine. Family's here, loved ones are here, I'm here, and it's fine. That's self-reflection as well. And once you do the impossible in one sphere, or you've done something impossible in your mind, the mind will take more risks because it will automatically say, hey, I've done that before. The problem with traditional careers and education is that it keeps you in this system where you're actually progressing, but the progression is automatically like, okay. So you build a lot of self-esteem and confidence, but you're still within the system. And the system has guided you somehow, held your hand. There's almost like a parent in you, like a secular parent, that the system held your hand, right? But once you take the risk, you're on your own. And once you do something on your own, it kind of rewires the brain and says, hey, I can do anything now. I can go here, I can go there, I can do anything. I think there's a famous samurai. I always forget his name. Japanese samurai. He had hand-to-hand combat for 62. I think he killed 62 people or something. I don't suggest anyone does this on the podcast, but he said once you learn something very well in one field, you can broadly and loosely match it to any other field or sphere. And he was a brilliant philosopher. So yeah, once you take that risk in one thing, even if it's small or big, the mind rewires itself, and it's rewired me saying, yeah, I can take risks anywhere and I'll be fine. And bring it all on. And I might lose, I might fail, but it's fine. I'm still here.
Yeah, it links back to that neuroplasticity thing. So again, sometimes I give this as a task to my clients, but actually write down things that you've done that you didn't think you were going to be able to do. Like you could almost remember you were saying to yourself, I don't know if I can do that. So it could be something as small as when you climbed a mountain with your friends, or what I think is really fascinating with your story is that you talk about weightlifting. There's a lot of research coming out now that says weightlifting actually improves confidence in men and women by a huge amount, because I think it's physically saying to yourself in your mind when you're lifting these heavy weights, I can do this, like I can do beyond what I think is possible, and to see that progression. Because if we all think about it, we were born with the ability to breathe and blink, and we've managed to achieve all these things in terms of walking, talking, reading, writing, singing, laughing, dancing, etc. All of these things were learned. So it's almost just challenging yourself. And I agree with your point about you almost need like a story that you can share with yourself about all the things you've achieved to kind of keep reminding you. Because as you said, the more you can remind yourself of all the risks you've taken and all the great things you've done, the more your brain will be like, yeah, no, totally, we've done that before, we can do this again, we're all good, it's all fine. Because it's up to you how you want to tell that story to yourself to empower you or not.
Yeah, it's almost like you're your own movie director,
Yeah,
right?
you are. Yeah.
And you're the script writer, and you're the producer, and you look back at everything, and you say, oh, it's been a great movie. What's the next scene? And then when you're dreaming of the next scene, what angles are the camera going to be? Who's going to act this out, and so forth. You're almost having that movie dream state in you. So yeah, I agree totally. I'm not airy fairy. I don't think anything's possible. I can't run like Usain Bolt or lift like these guys on Olympic stages. But if you have those kind of massive goals and you go towards this and you execute well, and again, be foolish and childish, I think you'll be fine, and take those risks.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice. I'd love to know from your perspective at the moment, what are the kind of trends that you're seeing within leadership at the moment?
Yeah, so within leadership, I'm seeing that a lot of the young individuals I meet and talk to, they're almost more fluid in terms of what they do and which leaders they follow, and it can be all over the place. And the ones who get followed the most, or the ones who actually are doing well, are the ones who have self-branded identity, particularly doing social media and so forth. I think leadership now is more social influence. Not always necessary towards good causes, but more of mindset, success, and so forth, and how people you can share that and help others as well. I see that as well. I think leaders now in pharma, in academia, in IT, tech, need to have more of a digital footprint, a social media footprint, have a personal brand identity, almost have to cross the line between, hey, I'm corporate, but this is who I am.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's actually
have that kind of ability to do so, because then it makes you human. Also, it allows young people to say, hey, I can get to that level, which is very important. You inspire and you motivate. Once you inspire and motivate, you self-inspire and motivate, and it's a cyclical cycle, and you get better and better and better. So that allows you to do so as well. So I think we need corporate leaders particularly have to be more transparent about their lives and what they want to do, and have a personal brand as well.
Yeah, it's really funny you say that, because that's actually one of the modules that we did recently with a client of mine, doing their leadership development, and something that I was absolutely adamant needed to be put in there because they were a completely remote company, was this idea of digital storytelling and digital leadership, like that personal brand element. So almost like do an audit of whatever social media channels you're on. Think about what do you want to like promote as yourself. So most people would probably use LinkedIn for work.
Yeah.
How are you presenting yourself on LinkedIn? You can show your personality. It doesn't have to just be, behind the scene, behind the brand of whoever you're working for. Like, what is it that you're interested in? How do you want to show up? How do you want people to engage with you? And it's also a great way for people to find you. Like, we found each other because of your team found my profile and my personal brand. So that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't put that out there and then you found the connecting dots. So I really encourage everyone to kind of go to their own profile, think about what it is that they, want to do or want to be known for, and put it on there. Make it so explicit it's obvious.
Yeah. And it's not showing off if you actually done the work. So, a lot of people say, I don't want to show off, I don't do branding, I don't know. No, I think it's not showing off. Actually, I think you're being selfish if you don't show off. I always say you got to be selfish to be selfless, right? If you don't show off, if you don't get things done, if you don't tell your journey to the CEO position or founder position, how is anyone going to follow you, work with you, or even get inspired and be motivated to be like you? So you got to be out there, and if you're not doing it, you're almost being selfish and also a bit lazy as well, because it does take some time to do those things. But if you've got the right team or right ethos, you'll be fine.
Yeah, I'd also add to that, if you're not sharing your story, how are people going to know what you can do? They're not telepathic, right? Nobody's like going through everything that you've ever done. No one's following you with a camera. This isn't like the Blair Witch Project. So you've got to actually just share with people, this is what I've done, this is what I've achieved, this is where I'm interested in, this is what I want to do next. And then people can help you. I've found it's incredible. Most people want to help. You just have to be super clear with what your ask is.
Yes, I agree. And also you got to be clear with your goals as well, because sometimes I think if you have a lot on your plate, you can get diverted very quickly. And what happens is your brain will have multiple goals, but no bigger goals or no smaller goals to execute there. I talk to so many people, and they say, "Hey, this is a big goal," but I say, "What is your practical execution for that goal?" And it sounds stupid, but they don't do it because the everyday today work or life and so forth, they don't do it. I also say, success is, when you look back at your achievements and you ask why it took so long, because you achieved a new level of thinking. So I think when I've been successful at certain things, I look back and said, hey, why did that take so long? Because the mindset has changed on the journey. Because if you're aggressive enough and you have those goals and you hit them, you're like, oh, I could do all these things so quickly because I was focused in getting things done. And so the mindset has changed during the journey. So I think that's important as well.
Yeah, and I remember we were talking before, and you said that one of the skills that every leader needs to have is sales skills. Why
Oh, yeah.
did you say that before
Oh, yeah.
when we were
Yeah.
chatting? I agree with you completely, but it's so interesting because most people shudder when they think, oh, I've got to kind of have a sales pitch or sales skills.
Yeah, life is three things, I say: a numbers game, a sales game, and a risk game. You get rejected so many times, right? And you have to take big risks, but the main thing is you're selling. We're selling now. You sell it for an interview, you sell to your partner or your wife or your husband when you first meet them, right? You're selling all the time, yourself and your outlook on the world. So sales is the main thing. I feel that it's important because um it's not sales per se, but it's you telling someone or something who you are and your value, and it's that exchange.
Mm-hmm.
It could even be exchanging energy or love or emotion or money or whatnot, but it's all a sales game. It's all a perception game, a sales game, and you need to identify that. If you have to be a good salesman or talk about yourself or talk about certain ideas, you need it, or no one's going to buy into you or your idea or your vision. or your ability to execute a job at a higher level, or even move to a new job. So that's very important as well. So it's all a sales game. So sales is very important to me. And I was very lucky that I fell into it after dropping out of high school, even working Clark's shoe shop on street, because it was teaching me, life was teaching me sales at a very young age.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. We are nearly at the end of today's recording, but I would love to kind of wrap everything up in that. Can you share with us your 3 top tips for leaders today on the digital age?
3 top tips. Number 1, take all the risks that you can in your plate, right? Number 2, make sure you have a social, personal brand, and you're out there sharing your personal story, personal brand out there. Number 3, I always say, look for talent around the world. There's some hidden gems out there. And once you get the right people, they'll bring the right systems and you scale very quickly. So that's very important. And not sometimes that talent hasn't got the perfect education, hasn't got the perfect mindset or the perfect kind of credential that fits the CV. But if you're digitally focused and you can have, assistants around the world, they'll transform your organization. So those 3 things.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Pradeep. How can people get in contact with you and find out more about your story?
So name's Pradeep Kumar Sacitharan. All my handles on social media are PK Sacitharan. My email is pks@donsol.com. LinkedIn's just my name. And I'm sure you and I will have some detail at the bottom of
The
this.
links will be all below.
And congratulations. It's been a fantastic podcast, and congratulations on your success.
Thank you.
We might be here next year talking about something else.
I hope so. I very much hope so. And to your success as well. Thank you so much for joining us today, and wish you all the best for your next endeavor.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye.